Well, those bales that you see behind me, those plastic wrapped bales, they contain cut grass. And it is a modern way now of preserving animal feed for winter. And I would like to explain it to you because the microbiology involved is actually quite interesting. This was several years ago. My kids were still smaller and they wanted to play on those bales that you see behind me. And the farmer came running and he really said, don't damage them, because if only a small hole is made into the plastic, it can swirl everything away. So what's actually going on here? He told us that if the plastic becomes damaged with a little hole even, then essentially air will be able to enter the bale, and then he has to throw away the whole bale. Because oxygen, he explained us, destroys everything. And the animals obviously then won't have any food during the winter time. Well, for most of agricultural history, and even nowadays, the way that you stored grass was quite simple. You dried it for storage. So you cut the grass first, and then you waited for several dry, sunny days. And once the moisture was gone, once the grass was dry, then you collected everything and you stored it in barns or in gigantic haystacks. And it was the standard winter feed for cattle for a long time. There is, however, a problem with hay storage in that way, because you are very much dependent on the weather. The grass had to be completely dry. If the hay went into the storage when even slightly too moist, then this can be actually quite dangerous. Bacteria and fungi would then start growing inside the pile. It would start to decompose, it would go moldy, and the microorganisms would eventually turn it to soil. Of course, then it's not suitable as animal food anymore. Now, it would result essentially in compost. But losing all of the animal feed is not even the main problem here. You could actually lose your whole farmhouse, because in the worst case, the whole thing could even catch fire. It's called spontaneous combustion, and it's a well-documented hazard in hay storage. Why? What's happening? Microbial activity inside the damp pile generates heat. And if the moisture content is just right, then the bacteria and fungi, they will start growing and they will start to release heat. The temperature in the pile will then actually go up. And the heat will start to build up, and it reaches a critical temperature. It will start to self-ignite. And this is a little bit counterintuitive because slightly damp hay is actually more dangerous than completely dry hay, because the moisture feeds the microorganisms, and the microorganisms, they generate heat, and under the right condition the whole thing starts to go up in fire. And this was actually a real recurring problem in traditional farming. And starting in the 1970s and becoming widespread throughout the 1980s, a different approach started to appear. And I remember well that when I was a child, that those plastic wrapped bales were not common practice yet. Instead of drying the grass before storage, the farmers began wrapping them in airtight plastic. And the grass was still relatively fresh, and of course also therefore moist. Now what happens inside the sealed plastic? Well, fermentation. Bacteria started to grow in the bale, and they used up all of the oxygen, and this made it impossible for molds to grow because they need oxygen. Anaerobic bacteria, they do not need oxygen. They were fine though, and once the bale was sealed and all of the oxygen was gone, these anaerobic bacteria, they took over and they started to ferment the grass, and they produced acid as a byproduct. And that acid gradually dropped the pH inside the bale. And it's the acidity and also this lack of oxygen that preserved everything. Well, even in food production for us humans, this is actually quite common. For example, sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, these are all products of fermentation. And in all of these cases, the pH is lowered to a point where harmful organisms cannot grow. The grass does not rot because oxygen is missing. There's also not much heat being produced. So instead of preventing the growth of bacteria by drying the grass, you now try to grow the right kind of bacteria by cutting off the oxygen supply. So the silage wrapping actually fixed several problems at the same time. First of all, the mold problem, we talked about that already. The mold problem is gone. The risk of fire is gone. Weather dependency is also largely removed because the grass can now be cut when it's ready, and no matter whether the sun shines or not. There's also another benefit that I did not talk about yet, and that is that the silage is actually highly digestible for cattle. And the anaerobic bacteria that produce also nutrients during the fermentation process, and the fermented material, the fermented grass, is actually quite well suited to feed the cows. Well, that's all from my side. I hope that you found the video interesting. I wish you all the best. Happy microbe hunting as always, and see you again in the next video. Bye bye.